Okay, so hello and welcome to the Monadnock Chorus Composer Interview Spotlight. Today we are joined by Tim Takach, composer of We Are Phoenix, the work that will be premiering right here in New Hampshire, the weekend of May 10th and 11th. Thanks so much for joining us today, Tim.
Of course, glad to be here.
We have some questions for you that were sent in about your work,
Yeah.
how it came to be, as well as the process you've used to sort of organize the poetry, the music, um, and I guess the overall narrative arc. Ready to get
hmm
started?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay. So I guess first, how did you put this concept together with the poetry, the music, and which came first?
Yeah.
Poetry, music?
It's a really simple question and it has a very complex answer. So I'm just going to start at the beginning and like we'll hit it all through the course of what happened. So I was brainstorming um, two things at the same time. One was that I was brainstorming ideas for a larger work that I could put together and write. The second thing that was happening at the same time was that I was thinking about my back catalog of work, especially work for choir, and I was thinking about all the pieces that I loved that are hard enough that they weren't getting what I thought was enough stage time. That I believed in them as music, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought I wish more people could or wanted to do this, but I understand why because they're tricky. There's some tricky spots. They were all a cappella, and I felt like they were written when I was writing them. I was like, let's see what a cappella choir can do. Let's look at effects. Let's look at like counterpoint. All these crazy things. Um, and so what happened was those two ideas sort of merged, and I thought, what if this large work was born out of a way for me to sort of repurpose my back catalog and take these pieces and rescore them in a way that takes some of the burden off of the singers, adds accompaniment so that the vocal parts are more accessible but easier to learn. There's not as many parts, there's not as much divisi. We put some of that load on some strings and we incorporate those into a large work. I thought, okay, this is kind of a cool idea. I like the idea that this is all my music. I can do whatever I want with it. I can put things in the same universe, take two pieces that were written in different time periods from each other in my life and sort of put them next to each other and have them be part of the same narrative. So I thought, okay, well, let's find out which pieces I'd want to sort of reuse and repurpose. And so I isolated those and had more than I wanted. Like there was a big list, and I didn't want to use that many. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought, okay, well, let's look at these and see what is similar between them. And one of the themes was nature, and so I thought, okay, well, nature's fine, but it's maybe not enough for me to want to create a narrative out of it. So what else is there? And so two of the pieces stuck out to me, which was Nubis Aureabatur, the Vesuvius piece, and then Ragnarok, which both are about these destructive forces of nature, one scientific and one mythological. But the fact that Ragnarok has the poem about the Colorado wildfires sort of built into it makes it more contemporary, sort of makes it lean more toward the scientific and the actual historical
Mm-hmm.
event. And so those sort of became tent poles in what I was now conceiving as a larger arc. So I thought, okay, well, we've got these pieces about the destruction of nature. Like, what does that mean? What does that lead me to? And then looking at other poems that I had flagged over the years that I would want to set one day, and seeing which of those poems sort of leaned toward that theme of nature and destruction and rebirth and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of where the theme came from. It was like, oh, well, look at these poems and look how it's, first of all, we're relating ourselves to nature. We are nature. We are not above it and over it. We are a part of it. So we are not merely observing eruptions and wildfires and destruction, but it is a part of our own ecosystem. And we also experience destruction and obstacle and things in our lives as human beings that are different from these natural events, but they're also the same.
Yeah.
Like they're also in our way and they also sort of tear us down to our core, and we have to get through them. And I'm not just talking about like, losing a job or, like a financial crash in the market, but it's depression, it's grief, right? It's like the loss of a relationship. It's all these things that take something away from us. And somehow we have to figure out a way to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So this theme was sort of emerging as I was looking at my back catalog of work, poems that I've always wanted to set but hadn't had a chance to. And so by that point, my list was real long. And I feel like I probably had like 80 minutes of music if I were to set all of it. I thought, okay, this is too much. I got to whittle this down. And so sadly, I had to pull some things out and say, maybe not this one, maybe not this one, which was fine because they were adjacent to the theme, but didn't really add to the narrative. So I really wanted to create a really tight story around this. Um,
Hmm.
so I had a list of texts. Some were brand new, some were already written. Um, and I thought this is a good balance of new versus old. I think there's maybe five pieces in this list that had already been written, and six or seven that were going to be new. I thought that's a good amount of work for what I'm trying to plan. And I knew that it would be work to try to take the old stuff and strip down the vocals, add the orchestrations, and sort of reuse that. And then I also wanted to add projections to the piece and hire somebody to make visuals to go along with the work. So at that point, I was ready to go. So again, complex answer. Some of the music came first because it already existed, and then some of the poetry um, came first because I hadn't set it to music first. What was lovely though is to be able to go to the pieces that I had written and mine them for melodic ideas, motivic ideas, little bits of music that I could use throughout the work and
Hmm.
sort of hang the whole thing together. And so there's moments of Imagine We Are Trees that show up quite a bit. I mean, we use it in the prelude, right? And it's the bookend of the piece.
Hmm.
And then there's excuse me, there's a bit in To Risk Your Heart that shows up in an instrumental version earlier. So it like I love repetition in music, and I feel like even if audiences don't recognize it, it's something that feels like home. If they hear something a second or a third time, so I'm a big fan of that. And so hopefully, you all are figuring that out as you're working through it and sort of like noting the places where different things show up that feel familiar. So that's the long,
Hmm.
complex answer to which came first, the music or the poetry.
I love it. I've actually pointed that out to the singers, that the audience may not realize the pieces that they hear, in
Yeah.
terms of themes and thematic material, but they will subconsciously realize it, and it'll come back through all again. And it's amazing. You've done a great job with it.
Thank you.
And so determining what is old versus what is new, which pieces did you have to completely create for this work, and which did you pull to that you've already written?
Yeah, so in the beginning and turning were both new. Those are at the top of the piece. The prelude or the first movement of the instrumental Imagine We Are Trees is the same material as the actual what used to be an a cappella piece, but it's repurposed a little bit to tighten it up. So it's not exactly the same piece. It's just that material sort of reworked.
Hmm.
New Bass was already written. Digging Up a Rose was new. Um, New Rising Endlessly, that little interlude, was just sort of a reprise of In the Beginning because I love that part of the text. Now let me tell you how things change. Like just a
Hmm.
reminder. Like all this stuff happens and it is what it is. And yet, let me tell you how things change. New
Yeah.
comes out of the old, right? It's sort of
Hmm.
holding people's hand through the narrative a little bit. I wanted to bring that one back. And then 10, I Fall, I Rise was also new.
Okay. Yeah, it's just such a great balance. And personally, I'm a sucker for Digging Up a Rose. I don't know
Oh, yeah.
why. It's
Yeah.
just it's I mean it's beautiful, but in the context of all of this hardcore death, destruction, renewal, you have just this little movement.
Yeah.
And the poetry is simple and human, and it really speaks to me that the fact that we can throw something away and it
Hmm.
grows despite us and in spite of us is
Right.
a really beautiful thought.
Right. And how cool that it's, I mean, there's a lot in this piece where it puts the power in your hands, right? You can do this, I can do this, we choose to do this. And yet that one's really passive, isn't it? Where we say
100%.
you can get cast aside and through no action, this thing can grow and thrive, even though it's been cast aside. And so whether you
Mhm.
whichever role you put yourself, whether you're the one doing the casting away or you yourself have been cast away, it's a very passive poem where it's like sometimes you don't have to do anything, it just emerges on its own, right? And whether that's inside of us or it is us, it doesn't really matter. But that is a real gem, I think, in the piece. And a lot of folks in the courses that have done it have said the same thing, where that one really stands out to them in a beautiful way. And funny story behind that. So Caitlin Vincent, who wrote that text, is my librettist for my opera that I wrote last year. And she's very vocal about the fact that she doesn't feel like she's a good writer of choral texts. She understands drama, she understands opera. She's like, oh, but I don't think I can write choral texts. And I said, Caitlin, you're wrong. This is perfect and it's beautiful and it's exactly what we all need and want to sing, and it feels good in the voice. And you are a writer of choral texts, whether you want to admit it or not. So I'm going to keep pushing her to write more of those because I think she's really good at it.
Yeah, she has something. She has something there. It's really wonderful. I think actually that goes into the next question that one of the singers had sent in. They'd said there are several points where the music is reminiscent of a show.
Mm.
For instance, they said, such as Dear Evan Hansen for them. And they wanted to know for you, A, do you have any favorite shows that you watch or that are go to? And do you pull from any of your thematic material, contextually at least, from modern productions?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I think I was more into Broadway when I was growing up. And so like the fact of you asking which shows I like, it's nostalgic for me. It's Phantom, it's Les Mis, it's Crazy for You, it's Sunset Boulevard,
Yeah.
And I haven't followed contemporary Broadway that much. And what I like about the Broadway genre is that they don't shy away from repetition. They don't shy away from melody. They don't. The songs are really tightly crafted. I think writing for stage is a delicate balance because you have to push the story along and you have to give people something that they can sing and remember. And it's different from opera in that way. And I kind of like that better. I think that a lot of times contemporary opera misses itself as far as melody goes and song goes. And so like personally, that's what I'm hoping to add to the opera genre is putting song back in. So it doesn't surprise me that it sticks out in that way as being reminiscent of Broadway, because I do like song and I do like melody. I like strophic material where the melody returns. And so Digging Up a Rose is a great example where we hear that melody again and again. And same with I Fall, I Rise. That feels very song-like because we hear that cadence come back and again. So I like that. I don't know Dear Evan Hansen, so I can't speak to that specifically. And I don't think that anything is intentionally derivative of a show or of that genre, but
Sure.
I do believe that as creatives, and I guess as people, like our artistic lives are made up of all these things we experience, right?
Yes.
Like so the albums you wore out when you were growing up, the concerts you went to, gallery exhibits, dance concerts, plays, Broadway shows, choral concerts that you sang, probably even maybe more than choral concerts you went to because it's like in your body.
Sure.
But you hold on to all these things. You hold on to the best parts of all these things for you. And you put two people next to each other and they're going to disagree on what their favorite moments are. And that's what's beautiful about human beings, right? So, but for you specifically, all those beautiful parts and the standout moments in your favorite songs and your favorite moments build up in your heart. And then when it's your turn to create something, you're drawing on all those. So it's not derivative work, but it is inspired by all the things that you love. Like you're going to create something that you also love, and it's taught by all these things that you've experienced. So I listen to Broadway, I listen to pop music, I listen to classical music. I like repetition. Like all those things are going to show up in my music, and I'm happy about that. I'm happy that I'm making work that I like and I appreciate, and I'm just hoping to find my tribe along the way of people that feel the same way.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to mention, whatever sort of pool people are soaking in musically speaking, that's what they'll tend to hear, right? In most
Yeah.
works that they'll listen to. So I think it's going to be really interesting to premiere this and hear totally different opinions about, oh my God, this movement really
Mm,
stuck out to me for this reason.
yeah,
And this one stuck out to me for this reason. And it's going to be dependent upon sort of musically where their mind is at, which is so
yeah.
fun.
Yeah, it is. And that's, I mean, all people are different people, right? And that's
Yeah.
why we do what we do. And
Yeah.
one of my most illuminating moments when I was still singing in Cantus was a conversation we were having while we were programming a show. And it was somebody said, listen, we're not all gonna like all these songs. So we're putting together our own program of 70 minutes of music. And it was sort of like a lightning bolt moment to realize, oh, I don't have to like all these songs. But because all people are different people, somebody out there will like the one that I don't. And that's going to be their access point to the whole show
Hmm.
is that one song that I don't like to sing, but they're totally into it.
Yeah.
So realizing that and knowing that somebody out there is going to pick a completely different moment or movement than you, that's kind of the beauty of humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it speaks to, I mean, the poetry and the work that you've
Yeah.
created. So the next question is possibly going to be answered. We're not sure if you're working on anything secret, but they want to know what you're working on right now.
Right now I'm between things. So I finished up a large work with my wife, who's also a composer, Jocelyn Hagan, and we wrote this large Christmas oratorio for Voces 8. And so we finished that up this early spring and went out to London to record it in March. And since then, I've been sort of bouncing back and forth between different residencies and traveling a lot and haven't been writing any notes down. So I'm a little like I miss it. And this week I'm ready to get back in. I'm writing a song, an art song for somebody. I'm getting ready to write a choral piece that's for a choral festival out in Seattle. I have a premiere here in town in 2 weeks with a group called Vocal Essence. It's a piece I wrote this spring for them, so that's coming up. And then my a cappella symphony called Helios, which is inspired by the solar system, that's being performed this weekend in Minneapolis with the projections, which is the first time that's happened here in the state. So there's a lot of performances and things happening, but I feel like I just have a lot of small things to do before I launch into other larger things. But I'm hoping to write a piece for band for wind ensemble as well in the next year.
Oh
So
my gosh,
um,
busy guy.
yeah, yeah, some fun things and some new things and just seeing what else is out there.
Yeah. Well, and for those who don't know, We Are Phoenix is getting premiered next June in the same month in Carnegie Hall and overseas in London. So
Yes.
you've got some crazy stuff coming up.
Yeah, and that'll be really fun because the Manhattan Concert Productions, that concert production company was my New York representative for this piece. So they are owning that New York premiere. And so we're looking at all the groups that have been performing the piece over the last year and a half to hopefully send some of their singers to become a part of that New York premiere as well, because they'll know the piece. But it's also a chance for folks that haven't done it and aren't a part of their own state premiere to come out and do that and be a part of the New York premiere or be a part of the UK premiere in London with Vox Anima. So it's pretty fun to be able to do both of those things in the same month, and I'll be there for both of them, watching them happen and being part of the rehearsals. So I'm excited for that quite a bit.
I am too. Hopefully I'll see you in London because
Cool.
it sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have a few questions about the texts. And it's like we said before, it's interesting to see people's mentality in terms of what they're really enjoying and what they are picking out to be super
Hmm.
interested in. So
Hmm.
this person says, Tim seems to have set out to emphasize the chasm between massively destructive natural events and almost microscopic focus on natural beauty and the power of love to rise above and survive. And so they want to know, did you start with the destructive poetry in terms of sort of piecing this together, which you spoke on before, but you wanted a nature focus, and they wanted to know the balance between the microscopic sort of focus on the individual tiny tiny leaf that we talk about in and
Mhm.
versus, the eruption of Vesuvius.
Yeah, it was the balance was intentional that the larger destructive poetic elements of Vesuvius and Ragnarok are awesome. They're awe-inspiring.
Yes.
There's a lot there.
Yep.
And I think it's hard to relate personally to it because one happened a very long time ago, and so we weren't there. There's no personal connection to that event. We just know it happened.
Mm.
And it's almost akin to the mythological story of Ragnarok, where it's a made up folk tale, right? That is used to illustrate what can happen at a certain point in society when everything is pitted against each other and there's no peace. Um, the two feel almost the same because one is made up and one could be made up because nobody was there. So I knew that I needed a human-sized access point into this story. That those two poems are not enough to hit us where we need to be hit as
Mm.
people. Right? I think that the power of art, the power of choral art, is changing people through texts, or at least justifying and supporting their beliefs about who we can be as people and how we can treat each other and how we can treat ourselves. So finding poems that weren't just zoomed out, but they were way zoomed in to the small and the like almost microscopic. And we have
Mm.
that, right? Microbes that make cheese. Like I've never set a poetic line
They
like
love
that
that
in
line.
my life. And it's buried, right? It's buried in the text here, but it's there. So we have that. We have these small things that are worth praising, right? That
Hmm.
can go unnoticed, but when you seek them out, like it's raining right now at my house, and so I'm thinking about whether it's hard rain or soft rain, hard pelting rain. Thinking about our pets, our dogs, the birds we hear outside, and imagining ourselves as trees, imagining ourselves as being a part of this ecosystem, and how the trees talk to each other through their roots, and they survive together, they lean on each other. For a long time out in my forest by my house, there was a tree that had fallen, and it didn't fall to the ground, it fell in it, and it got supported by a living tree,
Mm.
and it just sort of like stayed there for a while. And I love that image, that when we fall we are supported, and sometimes we are the ones that fall and sometimes we are the ones that support. And so that symbiotic nature of how we interact with each other in community, in our families, in our relationships. So it's everything, right? It's the
Mm.
small bits of nature through the people-sized bits of nature all the way up through trees and the earth itself. So it's like it's the whole gamut, and I want to sort of level the playing field of all those things and think about them as equal. So it was intentional,
Mm.
to answer the question, to sort of have that range, and think about it all in the same lens.
I love that. We have so I'm blessed to have a larger chorus in which people bring their wealth of knowledge to rehearsals. And
Yeah.
there are people who have experienced those wildfires in California or in other locations. And
Mhm.
for them personally, Ragnarok, that's a hard one. And some people have not experienced that. And so it's more of an empathetic feel rather than
Sure.
a visceral knowledge.
Yeah.
And they've been able to speak on that to the choir and say, this is real, this
Yeah.
is accurate. And then we had a historian pop up and talk about the poetry about Vesuvius
Mm.
and give some context historically about who the
Yeah.
poet was, the fact that he was a boy writing
Mm.
this, watching like firsthand account, which Pliny the Younger was just, it was interesting to see sides that I had no idea. And so you've done a really wonderful job. So we have a few last questions for you before I take up all your time. How do you manage being a full-time composer, performer, musician, businessman with having a family and being married to someone who has the same blessing in a career?
Mhm.
So how do you manage that in your life?
I mean, I think all those sort of hyphens that you mentioned at the beginning they're all part of the same thing for
Mm.
me anyway. I think about composing as my day job, and since I retired from Cantus, I've missed singing, and so I try to fit that into my life when I can, because I love it so much, and because composing is such a solitary career and work that I miss the social aspects of singing and being with people. And so I also work as a conductor, both here in Minneapolis, but then also out and about doing honor choirs and things like that. And I like that social interaction. I like making music with people on the ground versus just in my head and making a set of instructions and sort of mailing it off.
Hmm.
So the fact that I'm the real balance, I guess, then it is between the different aspects of the music making, right? The composing and the singing, the conducting, making sure it all balances out. And there are decisions that end up being a financial decision.
Hmm.
Can I take this gig even though it doesn't pay very much, or should I say no to that because this one's more lucrative?
Hmm.
And that's the business person side of it, is just like making sure that the bills can get paid and that we're getting what we need financially.
Hmm.
And it's just a logistical decision. And then there are times when something will come up and say, that one does not make sense financially for me. And I'm going to say yes to it because I love it, because I
Yeah.
love the people, or I love the music, or the opportunity, or it's like an investment in future things.
Mm.
Like, this one's not a great opportunity, but if I do it, it might get my foot in the door for other bigger opportunities down the line. And
Sure.
so recognizing that which is also, it's a mix between me as a passionate hobby musician, somebody that just loves the work,
Mm.
and somebody who's a business person that can recognize the value of a return on investment. Say, well, if I do this for this person, it might yield something more for me later down the line. It's a balance of all those things. And honestly, that then the family aspect is tricky, and that's changed over time. So our kids right now are 16 and 13, so they can manage themselves pretty easily. The hardest thing is when we're gone, getting them to eat the right kinds of foods, because I don't know how they do it, but they find in the house all the stuff that's not really good for them, and that'll be their lunch. It's like, no, no, no. Okay, we've talked about balanced meals, guys. So it's easier now to take off for a bit. Like yesterday, I was gone before they woke up till dinner time doing stuff, and they were fine. When they were younger and they needed more, it was a very it was a logistical conversation all the time between Jocelyn, my wife, and I, of who is going to be gone when and how are we going to take care of the kids and how
Hmm.
is that going to happen. And
Yeah.
so we'd have to say no to something because she'd already committed to that. I need to be home, or I was already out on tours, so she needed to make sure she was home for being with them. And that's changed over time. We tend to, well, I tend to turn things off at the end of the business day now, since they've both been in school for a long time. That's my work day, and when it's done, I'm kind of done with work for the night, and I'm able to do things with them and do things around the house.
Hmm.
But as we know, being a musician also comes with nights and weekends, so there's a balance there too of there are times when we'd like to be home but we're not. So it's just a constant balance of reevaluating things and trying to decide what the most important thing is in time. Jocelyn had a performance here in town a couple weekends ago, and I was like, do you want me to go to that? And she's like, you could. I'm like, I'm just thinking, like, we've been gone for a while. I'd love to just be home with the boys that night and not
Hmm.
have one more night where we're both out of the house and they're just on their computers playing games.
Yeah.
So we balance it out. And honestly, that um, being married to a composer is quite nice. I think that I can certainly see situations where it wouldn't work out, but for us,
Hmm.
it really has. We both have a really high level of respect for each other's work, and
Hmm.
so that goes really far. Knowing that I sometimes I don't understand how she does her work, but I can respect it, and I know where she stands in our community, and I respect that. So, and it's mutual. So we get it. We don't need to explain our work to each other, but we talk
Hmm.
shop all the time. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's with the goal of getting feedback and getting advice. And sometimes, as we know, we just need to say it out loud and vent about something and say, you wouldn't believe what happened today.
Uh-huh.
Not to the extent of like fix this for me, but just I got to tell somebody about it, and I want to have to start from zero and explain it all.
Yeah.
I want to start from 70 and just explain the 30% that matters. So
Mm.
it's really nice to have that, and we both just understand each other, and it's been nice to work together on a bunch of things too. That's been really fun and lucrative for us too.
So it sounds like communication is really big in your household.
Well, it is when we can get it. I feel
Yeah.
like, when we wind down for the evening and we're both like in bed with a book, if there's conversation, it's like, okay, so tomorrow you're going to go here, but I'm going to get Milo from his baseball game and then drop him off. But then I've got to go, but you'll be home in time for dinner. So, but we need to make sure that Oscar has food for his, like, it's all logistics. And
Yeah.
that's probably the same for any family, no matter what your work is. But
Mm.
like, it's definitely open conversation and texting, like, did you pay neighbor boy for watching our cats last weekend? No, I
Hmm.
did. Can you take care of it? Yes, I can. Like stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love it. Well, Tim, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for
Of
spending time
course.
with us.
Of
And
course. Well, I'm just
we,
so excited that you're a part of this piece and happy to sort of weigh in and explain a little bit of behind the curtain about the piece.
well, I know our singers and our audiences are really going to appreciate the thought behind the creation of the work and just generally meeting you. I think
Mm,
that's also really important. So, we have one last quick question. What do you
yeah.
do for fun? What's your go-to?
Ah. So I like to play a lot of board games. And so I like to do that with people. But honestly, like last night I had an evening free and I just played video games for like 2 hours and it felt like the most luxurious thing
Yes.
ever. And then
Yeah.
I'm also a horror movie fan. And so
Mm.
Jocelyn's been out of town this weekend and the boys wanted nothing to do with me at night. They're doing their own thing. So I just watched a couple horror movies and had some popcorn and yeah. And I
Just
also
relaxed.
yeah, just relax. And so I also like to get some exercise and go out biking and I read a lot. So
Hmm.
it's all good.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks,
And
Morgan.
uh, to our audience, thank you for supporting live music. And please come see We Are Phoenix at the Peterborough Townhouse, May 10th and 11th. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Morgan.